We're learning Aruch HaShulchan Hilchos Rosh HaShanah, Siman 586. First Sif. The Rambam writes, the first parak of shofar. Shofar that you blow between Rosh Hashanah and on Rosh Hashanah, and you also blow it when they had the yovel it was blown Yom Kippur. What horn is that? That's the horn of a keves, of sheep, or rams, which is bent, and all other horns are possible or not kosher, except for the keren, the horn of this sheep. Meaning, a keren, a horn of a male sheep, and it's called an ayol. Usually, an ayol is 2 years after a year old, and he has a keren. He has a nicely shaped horn, and it's bent because that's the way it is grows. HaKadosh Baruch Hu causes it that way, to grow that way. However, a female sheep does not have a horn. As we find in Rosh Hashanah 16a, the Rav says, why do you blow in a shofar of an ayil, which is more than 1 year old? It's a 2-year-old animal. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, blow before me in the shofar of a ram, so I will remember the Akedah of Yitzchak, that Yitzchak was brought up on the altar, Yitzchak ben Avram, and I will then act as if you yourself were brought before me on the Akedah, and meaning you have sanctified my name. And therefore, even though we learned in the beginning of the third parak of Rosh Hashanah that all the shofars, any horn is kosher, except for the horn of a cow, which is not a horn. And then we learned that the shofar of Rosh Hashanah is of a yael, which is simple. The halacha is not so. But rather, the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, who says in the Mishnah of Rosh Hashanah, you blow in that of a male animal, and the Bryce it says in Rosh Hashanah that you use one that is bent. Why it doesn't mention the Mishnah that it needs to be bent? Because whenever it mentions an ayil, that's the natural way that it grows. The Brisa explains more specifically that it is a male and it's bent. And males are called Elim, as we find in the beginning of the fourth parak of Shabbos. Zchorim yoitzim levuvin, that Zchorim go out with their rear covered, and it means these are Elim. Therefore, the Aruch HaShulchan says it would seem because in the type of kvosim, it's interesting. He states he notices that there's a great difference between the males and the females. The males have horns, the females do not have any horns. This is not found by any other species, and therefore the ayil is called an ayil because it's understood to be a male, since the female of the sheep species does not have a horn. In the Gemara, the halacha is cited like Rabbi Yehuda, as we say there. Amar Levi. Rabbi Levi says mitzvah, the mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah of Yom Kippur is in a bent horn. The halacha is Rabbi Yehuda. Now we go to Sif Beis. When Rabbi Levi says it's bent, he's also talking about an ayil, because he codifies the law like Rabbi Yehuda. When he says bent, that means elim, as Rashi says there. In Rosh Hashanah, as much as a person bends himself when he's praying, and his face is, in a sense, when you bend yourself, your face is bent towards the earth, it's like it's into the earth. The more he does so to show his embarrassment that his deeds a whole year, therefore the prayer is more readily accepted. Therefore, on Rosh Hashanah, that it's for prayer and to remember and remind the fact that Yitzchak was brought on the Akedah, on the altar on the side of the Beis Hamikdash, Therefore, it needs to be bent. So we see specifically stated that it's a ram, since it comes to remind us of the Akedah of Yitzhak. That's why when it says bent, because Elim are only bent, usually. And according to what I mentioned, in the Mishnah, we mentioned Rabbi Yehuda, only Schorim, males. In the Brisa, it's mentioned males that are bent. Levi mentions only bent. Avu mentions only males because it's one item. However you express it, it applies only to an ayol where it's bent horns, and it's a male. Now, according to the Rambam, we find Rashi also agrees with the Rambam in Tosfos and Smag, Nagos Maimoni, because Rashi says, since it's written that it's bent, it comes to tell us the Akedah of Yitzchak, of the ayol. So we see it has to be a ram's horn, which is only from sheep. The Tosfos says, we codify the law like of Yehuda, that you do only with rams that are bent. And so right the Smag, that the text in Rosh HaShanah is, why do you blow in the shofar of a ram, even though that we learned elsewhere that all the shofars are kosher. Who was of the opinion like Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Levi, the mitzvah is with a male horn of a bent, which is an elim. That's the halacha. Everyone says this. And so goes Maimonides says so, and Sefer Yereim. According to this, we have to understand all those rabbis in the Shulchan Aruch that didn't bring this rule of the Rambam. Why didn't they do so? It's because they saw the Torah brings the Rambam, and he writes that everyone joined him, and therefore he didn't bring his specifically as the Rambam states. But even though the Rav and the Rosh and the Ran, the Torah, disagree with the Rambam, as we'll explain, since Rashi, Tosfos, Mag, and Agoros Maimonides and Yereim do agree with the Rambam that there is no shofar kosher, only that of a ram, and it's bent, thus we know that we have to be careful of their words as well. If we do it with a ram, for sure we fulfill everyone's obligation. And certainly so when it comes to a question of fulfilling the type of shofar, if we don't use any other. And this is the meaning of all Yisrael. See, the Tazi says what he wants to say in the intent of the Rambam. Everything he says is not understandable, and at times even the holy people, he writes, make mistakes, and the Hacham Tzvi and Pri Megadim already pointed out that what he wants to point out is not that definitive. Siv Dalet. The Rosh in Perek Gimel writes, the name of the Ramban, that there are three type midos in the shofars, measures in the shofar. Even if there's a shofar that's not of an ayil, it's kosher b'di'evet when you have nothing else, whether it's straight or it's bent. The only one that's definitely not good for a shofar is that of a cow, because it's a keren. It's not called shofar. It's a different. It's made of bone, and only to begin with you need to have it bent, and to complete the mitzvah in the best possible way, and to remind the Akedah of Yitzchak, for sure you have to use an ayil. But since it's la halacha, we can rely on it if we have nothing else, except we can't use that of a porah. Halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that it's best to be bent, and the best thing is to use an ayil. Now, Sif Hey, he continues. And this is the words of the Beis Yosef in the first Sif in Shofar of Rosh HaShanah. The mitzvah is with a horn of a ram and bent. With the Eved, all shofars are ksherim, whether they're straight or bent. The best thing is to be bent, and a pora is possible in all instances. Most chayos, which are animals, which are one piece of bone, rather than having within them sections, different poor parts, such as the ram does. And therefore, the mitzvah is mostly, it should be from a ram and bent. But after the fact, everything is kosher, and the more bent it is the greater the mitzvah. Furthermore, you can say the opposite, that ayil is more of a mitzvah than bent, because everyone agrees that it reminds us of the Akedah of Yitzchak. But bent, the Tanakhama disagrees on Yehuda, and is of the opinion that it should be straight, even though that's not the ultimate halacha, but still, that bent is only a mitzvah min hamubcha. It's a more appropriate way to fulfill the blowing of the shofar. And therefore, we use that of a ram, and it's bent. That's the best way of fulfilling the mitzvah. But as we said before, if you have nothing else, you can use those. But to begin with, one should try to use that of a ram, because there's no one who disagrees that that's definitely good. And should be bent more so than straight, again, because this is the best fulfillment of the Mishnah, or the mitzvah. And the Rambam and Rashi and Tosfos and the Yereim are of the opinion, but the others are not kosher. And therefore, one should attempt to find such a shofar. Sivov, the Aruch HaShulchan writes, Rabbeinu Aramoh, he's the one who wrote the notes on the Shulchan Aruch. And also an animal from a treifa, from a behemoth that's not kosher, it's possible. Meaning, even those that say all types of horns, except for the horn of a cow, is kosher, but definitely not something which is a treifa animal, because we only use kosher animals. As we say in Shabbos regarding the Mishkan, that everything that was used there for a mitzvah has to be from an animal which is Torah, not Tmeyo, not treif. Meaning, and therefore, this is the exclusion, which is not part of the mitzvah. For example, the walls of a sukkah, or which you can have even wood and stone. So there you can use leather of an animal as well that's not kosher, as we find in sukkah. You can make a elephant as one of your walls. Certainly, this elephant skin for sure. It's no different than a stone or wood or stone. You should know that even though in the Mishnah Nida it would seem that a behemoth tmeya has no horns, and therefore you won't find such a thing, not everyone agrees with that. The Chacham disagree, as we find in Chulin. And furthermore, the Rambam explains that we're talking about wild animals, but animals themselves, you can find they have tusks, which are called, and one has to be concerned. So therefore, one should make sure not to use that of an animal which is not kosher. In Sif Zion, if somebody stole or robbed a shofar and he blew in it, he's yotze. Even if the owners didn't give up, they still want to get it back, because using the voice of it doesn't really cause a change in the item. Even though, if this item would be sanctified for Hegdish, we say that even by sanctified, you're not utilizing the item. If you either hear it, or see it, or smell it. This applies to the incense that was smelled, and the things that were seen, and the voice of the blowing of the trumpets and the shofars in the Beis Hamikdash. Even though it's forbidden, you find in Psochim 26a. Here, to begin with, one shouldn't make a broch on a stolen shofar. How can you make a broch when he stole it? But the positive commandment is Yoitza, and he can take a shofar of his friend without his knowledge, because his friend definitely wants that a mitzvah should be done with his money, where he has no loss. As we will write in Sif Yud Aleph, by talis. With Simeon Aleph, we say this regarding a talis, that if you see a talis, people want it to be used. And you can't ask why by lulav you need to have on the first day it should be yours, and it's not good enough to use somebody else. That's because there's a possible like you have to take yours, and yours is only when it belongs to you. In Siman Tuf Reish Nun Ches, which is 658, that's where we learn the halacha of lulav. And therefore, by shofar also, it should be his, because by shofar it says, Yom Trua Yelochem. It should be a day of blowing for you. However, it's not quite the same lochem, because there it's on the taking of the item, acquiring it, and means it has to be yours. But here it means you have to accomplish this. And so we find Yerushalmi in Sukkot, the beginning of Lulav HaGozel, the third Perik, the first Mishnah. Rabbi Yosef, and it says right here, explain that the Raven, who disagrees with the Rambam in this rule, why he disagrees. In Halacha, there are those who want to say Sheva Gozel should not be kosher according to Yerushalmi, but all the Rishonim, the early commentaries, explained that it only refers to Lulav, and that is the halacha, that it's only by Lulav that we apply this law that it has to belong to the person himself. We're continuing in Sif Ches. In the Gemara, a person shouldn't blow lechatchila in a shofar shel oilo or shlomim. If you blow, is yotza. The mitzvahs were not given to benefit from them. That every mitzvah that has no hanoah, gashmias, only the hanoah of the mitzvah, you can't say that he's nenem and hegdish. The mitzvahs are not layanis nitnu. But if not for this reason, he wouldn't be yotzim. And even though the koil, ain't by mishum me'ilo, that hearing the voice through the shofar doesn't have me'ilo, still behegdish, that's by me'ila behegdish, but something, and even though you need hano v'shor puto, still, even though mitzvahs are not, I understand, no, everybody will give a puto to kima mitzvahs. Mekayim the mitzvah itself. That's why lechatchila we shouldn't blow b'shofar shel oilo yishlama. But b'diavad yoytz. The Aruch HaShulchan continues. Also litkoya b'shofar shel avodas yechovim. If it was a shofar of avodas yechovim, that means that they bowed to it, or it was from the things that were utilized for the temple of idol worships. It's considered repugnant to Shemayim to do a mitzvah with it. But again, since the voice has nothing to do with the actual shofar, it's not like a benefit of a mitzvah lavdan. That's only when it belongs to a goy, that the goy can nullify it. Therefore, even before he nullifies, he's yotzei. But if it belongs to Yisrael, that Yisrael can't nullify anything. If avodah zarah that belongs to Yisrael, it needs burning. And a shofar, in order to blow, it has to have a shiur, a measurement. Even though physically you see there's a shiur, anything has to be burned is considered doesn't have a shiur. As we learn that the length of a shofar has to be at least 4 finger breadths. And since it is going to be burnt, it's as if it was burnt already, and it's lacking in having a measurement. But that of an Anju, even before Bittul, since it can be nullified. You do not say it's missing a shiur. That's only when the Yisrael didn't have intent to be married to acquire the shofar. If you want to acquire the shofar, it's a nice shofar. You want to acquire it, it becomes a Yisrael, and outside it's still avodah zarah because the guy did not nullify it, and he doesn't have any nullifications. The Jew cannot nullify it, and even though it belongs to a goy, it still is avodah zarah. So what does it help that he wants to acquire it? It belongs to somebody else. And the goy is not giving it to him. So the Aruch HaShulchan says there are those who say only if the goy threw it away or put it out and said he doesn't want it anymore, it belongs to the Yisrael. That if he has intent to acquire it, not shaver of a goy. It's not the case, as we find in many other places. And the reason is, since he wants to steal it, and if you would have to pay back the goy, so that portion of it that's Jewish, it's called the Yisrael. That portion that he acquires, even everybody acquires something, even in a stolen item. And there's also a din of that we forced it to the goy to give it to him before he nullified it. Because after he nullified it, then what's wrong with it? But because then we don't say it's lacking in measurement. It's no longer avodah zarah. Why? Because a goy can nullify. It's the Yisrael had intent to acquire it before he nullified it. He should not give it to a goy. And how will he nullify it? And therefore, it's lacking in the necessity of measurement, and therefore he's blowing in a shofar that doesn't have a measure; it's too small. And we said it needs four finger breadths. In Siv Yud, the Ramah writes in Siv Gimel that those are machmer, those who are more stringent. Even with the goys, they are not yoitz. Only when the goy nullified before Yontif. Why? Because there are many times the opinion that when can you fulfill your obligation with that of a goy is only after you nullify it. After he nullifies it. As it says in Taisus Chum 89a. Before he nullifies it, since it needs to be burnt, it's missing a measurement. Therefore, needs to be nullified from Erev Yontif. If not for that, since at the beginning of Yontif he couldn't use it, it cannot be considered usable on Yontif. The same as we'll learn in 646 in Yetzer Hashem, that the Hodas, meaning the myrtle twig, when it has many grapes on it, has many berries on it, and they're more than the leaves, it's possible. However, if he took off the berries, it's kosher. That helps even when he does it on Yontif. Why is that so? If we say before Yontif it wasn't kosher, now on Yontif it became kosher, because he can always do that, and it's not considered as if it was pushed off at the beginning of Yontif. However, the Jew cannot nullify it. And therefore, at Erev Yontif, even though he's saying you're a day, that when it comes to mitzvahs, you don't say something that wasn't relevant to be a mitzvah, can never again be a mitzvah. However, by Sukkah we say it's a questionable judgment, and since we're not sure, you're not yoitz. This thing of the shofar not having been eligible at the time of the entrance of Yontif, the question of whether it comes back and can be usable on Yontif is found in different places, that before they served it, it was worthy of being a shofar, and afterwards it was pushed away from being a shofar. And when he nullifies it, it becomes back. So this is a questionable item, and therefore that you shouldn't use it even if it's not of a goys unless he nullified it before Yontif. As if Yud Aleph, he discusses tikroivis kechavim, meaning that the animal that's brought for the avodah zarah, this aspect, something that's brought before avodah zarah, in some ways is more stringent, the connection to avodah zarah, than even the idol worship itself, because even a goy cannot nullify it, because once it's been used as a sacrifice, it can never be nullified, even by a goy. Like this we find in Yeridea, and also Shofar of an Irani Dachas, a city Chachmon al-Islam, that in its totality we accepted Avodah Zorah, the majority of the people, you're not Yotzim, because it's lacking in measurement. And it would seem that Shofar of Avodah Yechom is only if he's bowed to it. But if he bowed to the animal, and then he took the shofar from the animal, then the shofar is all right, because while it's alive, the horns do not become osa. Nothing that's alive becomes osa. As we find here there, Simin Kuf Mem Hey. Furthermore, this is how we say that you have to nullify it from Erev Yontiv. That's true even with regard to Yontiv by night, because it's before the time of Tkiyas. It's like Erev Yontiv. As long as it's before the time that by day when you have to blow the shofar. Someone was taking a vow not to benefit from a shofar. He said that this shofar is forbidden from me. He can listen to a kia when someone else is blowing the shofar, because this is again the benefit of a mitzvah, and a mitzvah was not given to benefit from. But he himself should not blow it to begin with, because others benefit, and therefore he benefits that others are giving him thank yous, accolades. Still, if there's no one else, he should blow himself, because it's not really a true benefit, But to begin with, it's better that somebody else should blow it. That's why it says, Hashonoh shofar zeh olai. That's only when he says, this shofar is forbidden to me. But if he says, I forbid the shofar to hear the blowing, then he can't blow it himself either, because that means he forbade the listening to the shofar, and certainly it includes also the blowing, which has permissible, which has nothing to do with Rosh HaShanah, and it's not the same as somebody would say, I take a vow not to blow shofar. There, he's making a vow not to keep Torah, and you can't have a shiur that take away from him the obligation of the mitzvah. But nedorim occur on a dvar mitzvah, as we know in Yeridea, and there the reason is explained, because it's not the person who's being nullified from doing the mitzvah, it's the shofar which is forbidden to him. But tkiya, the blowing, has no actual substance to it, and therefore he says, if what the shofar sounds, or any sounds of his blasts are forbidden, then he can't use it. But if he said this shofar should be forbidden to blow, then the shofar has actuality, and therefore you would not be allowed to blow from that shofar. Except that, and since he can blow from other shofars, he's not negating the mitzvah of shofar. This is very applicable, Sif Yud Gimel, to any Rosh Hashanah. Any voices that you hear are okay by a shofar, whether it's a thick voice or a thin voice or dry. It's all kosher. But that's only when you hear it. But if it's so soft, you're not yotze. Even when somebody is next to it, can hear it. Because that's not called voice of shofar. We need to hear a shofar. That's a lotion of trua. Means strength, urea, and therefore all occurs like ksherim, but you still need voice. And if it's too soft, it's not a voice. Learning the Aruch HaShulchan Arachaim, Hashonoh Sim Tufkuf Pei 586, Sif Yudal in the Aruch HaShulchan. The Rambam writes in the first parak, Din Hey, the shiur HaShofar, he has to hold it, and it should be seen from both sides. Therefore, if it's split down the middle to its length, it's possible. Across its width, it's if he has the majority of a shiur, meaning it's split, it's longer, it's a foot long, and he has left to it 4 finger breadths, it's kosher. And that's when you see the place where it's broken. Now, if it has a hole in it, if he closed the hole with something which is not a piece of shofar, it's possible. If you use the piece of shofar to close it, if the majority is whole and the hole did not change the voice of the tkiya, it's kosher. And this is what he mentions. He has to be able to hold it. You should see on both sides protruding from his hand. It doesn't mean that it depends on the person who's blowing, and everybody's hand is large or small. It doesn't matter. It goes according to a normal individual, average individual, and the shiur is a tefach, which is 4 thumb widths. And there are those who say it needs a little bit more, the tefach, spread out tefach, but the Torah Shulchan Aruch didn't require that. It's enough of a tefach. Here you see it on both sides. You have somebody who blows, he holds it in his 4 fingers, and it remains a little bit since he's holding with his regular fingers, and therefore there's enough that people see the shofar, so that people will not say that he's somehow doing a trick and using his hand to blow through. In Siftes Vov, the Rambam writes, if it was split along its length, it's possible. He doesn't say how long or the length. Does it mean the entire length, part of it? And there are different opinions about this. There are those who say even a little bit, as long as it's along the length, it's possible, because when it's in the length, it will ultimately split completely from the force of the sound. It's worse than a hole, or if it's split across, and you see that it's broken, and we don't view the other part of it as belonging to the shofar. And it's simple. According to this thought, still it should be split the entire thickness until the inner part of the shofar. The fact that it's cracked on the outermost surface doesn't mean anything, because it doesn't upset anything. There, it doesn't. Once it doesn't reach the inside, it doesn't matter, because even then it's okay. But if it was split in such a way that in the length, even if the sound remains the same, it's possible, because it's going to split ultimately, and therefore it passes it right now, even though it hasn't split completely. And the Aruch HaShulchan writes, I believe, according to the Shita, It's only midrabanan. In Torah, why should it be possible? Just because it's going to split. Because usually we don't have this concept uh, except by something that's going to be redeemed, as if it's redeemed already. And we don't pass him like that either. Rav Shimon is the only one who feels that way, even by redemption. The Chacham disagree with him. And therefore he says it must be Mirabonon. Maybe it will break completely, and he won't notice it. Now the Rosh agrees to this thought. Then writes, therefore the Torah writes, if it was split along its length, even a little bit is possible. That's only if you didn't cause it to be glued together. But he has to glue it together with its own horn. In other words, with the shofar. Ramban writes that glue is not minoi. Only we're talking about here where somehow they could, when they make a shofar, they actually cook it, becomes soft, and then you're able to attach it together. And he writes that others of the opinion that if he glued it, it's considered one item because it's only that item with the glue. However, when he sealed the hole with something which is a foreign material, and it's different than when he uses glue, because the glue is not visible and it's just holding together the horn, the shofar. But even according to the Rosh, they permits gluing because you can't tell that it's there. If the glue should be noticeable, then, or if some other item is used where you can see it's visible, then it would be possible. In Seviyut Zayin, he writes, however, the Beis Yosef seems to say you can tie it with a chutz. And the question is, he goes into the whole question of going back and forth, whether we're talking where there's a shiur in the shofar till where you tie it together. In other words, it's split along the length, but it's from the mouth till the point where it begins to split along the length is kosher, is 4 finger breadths. Therefore, if you tied it afterwards, then it would be okay. And it would certainly be that if it's less than 4 finger breadths, it's possible in Torah, because it's considered like it's separate from the place where he's blowing, which is different. When he left from the shiur Atkiya, there's no psum rabbonon. That's what the Ramah wants to say here, that it depends where the string is attached to. But from the Rambam himself, in Sefer Yudches, he says, it would seem the Rambam himself is of the opinion only it was the whole length is possible. Rashi too seems to say that it was entirely broken. And also the Balei HaTosfos write, Zat possible only if it was entirely broken from beginning to the end. And the Rambam, if you would be of the opinion that even a little bit or the majority of it is possible, he should have explained it. It must be that he's of the opinion like Rashi and Tosfos, only when it's entirely split is it possible, because then it's like 2 shofars together, and therefore even if you attach to it with its own type, it doesn't help, because you can't put 2 shofars together to make one out of them. For example, if they're too short or they're 2 halves. Even though technically you can do it, but halachically it's not kosher. Furthermore, there's those who say that when it's split completely it's possible, and Rabbeinu, the Beis Yosef writes, Dafke beruboi, only the majority. But if you attach this, if he looted it's kosher, and those that say that's not kosher, only that he heated it up until it became soft. And Sifyu test basically says that when it's split, the majority is split, it's possible. Only by the majority. It's kosher, even with glue. And there are those who say it's not kosher when he made it soft, and it was split completely. It's possible even if he made it soft, as long as the minute amount is attached. Is not called like two shofars. Therefore, you can attach it. However, when it's totally split, then you have a big problem because you're making a new shofar. The Maggid Mishnah writes, even by the majority, it doesn't help to glue it, and others disagree with them. And when it's split the whole way, again, we emphasize it's only if it goes through into the center of the shofar. If it's just cracked on the outside, then it's kosher, even without rectifying anything at all. You find many shofars like that. Baruch Hashem, today we have many shofars, and with Hashem, as if we'll talk about if it's split in its width. This is Siman Tufkuf Pevov 586 Siv Chov. We'll try to keep it shorter because it's a very, very long siman. We learned in the Gemara that if it's split, it's cracked by across the width. In other words, half of the shofar is nearly cracked off from the other half, and a little bit is connected. So it's kosher. So we'll go to Sifchov Aleph, where he brings down that the Beis Yosef explains that there has to be enough left from the portion where his mouth holds the shofar till where the noise would come out if the other part that was split would fall off. Then it's kosher. But otherwise, even if it's makiv the tefillah, because it went through as a coil, that's okay, and only afterwards it became a different sound. Now, in Sivcha of Beis, he talks about what happens if there's a hole in the shofar. And it's not split. We wrote already in Sif Yudalad. The Rambam writes that if he closes it with something that's not shofar material, it depends. Then it's not kosher. But if he glued it, it would be okay, as long as it's not visible. There are three things that are required. It has to be shofar, a piece of shofar to close it, and even if it's something that's not shofar, even if it doesn't affect the tone, and the majority has to be kosher. Has to be the original material of the original shofar. But if the voice became different before it was closed, we're not worried about that. We're talking about now, after we closed it, what the rule is. Taisus is of the opinion, though, that if he closed it with shofar material, and you have the majority of the shofar, even if the voice does not go back to the way it was originally, is kosher. In Sivchov Dalet, he discusses if he glued portions of shofars one with the other, it's possible, because it has to be one shofar. It says shofar, but not shofros. If you have two or three shofars that you made one shofar out of, it's not kosher. In Simchov Hey, he says, therefore, it's forbidden to make a shofar by putting together two pieces, one on top and one on the bottom, even if the upper part alone has the part that's near his mouth has the amount of shofar, even if it's a big shofar, if he added from another shofar to make it longer, it's possible because it has to be one shofar, not 2 or 3 shofars. And therefore, if he adds to the shofar more than it was before, it's possible. In Sivcha Vav, he discusses if he took it and blew it from the larger end of it to the other side, the small end. I've seen people blow that way. He's not yotze. It doesn't matter whether you take the large end to the short end or he turns it inside out, because when you heat it up, you can turn it inside up. Even if you made the large end small, the small end large by this heating up. However, if the shofar was long and he made it short, he took off a portion of it, since he has a portion of the shofar in his hands, then it's kosher. Even though he's blowing the upper portion of it, which he's now made possible to blow through. But the Aruch HaShulchan says that's only if he cut off beyond, not at this point where it starts the shofar, but rather it was too long, then he can cut off. But if he cuts off in the middle, then that's not where the shofar has the small part, and therefore it's not correct to use that type of a shofar. The shofar is obviously, as you see, it has a hole. It has a hole through it. It's hollow, and while the horn is on the ram, it's not hollow because there's the bone that goes into it. And when you take it off from the ram, so you push out that bone, and that's what makes it hollow. And even if you didn't take out all of the bone, you just made a hole through it, let's say with a drill, you can still use it because the bone is considered part of the horn, because that's the way it's created. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the ram that way. But it's better, obviously, to take out the bone. That's the minig poshet. One shouldn't change it. And if somebody took out the inside and made a hole in the inside, and he blew with it, possible, because that's not a shofar. A shofar can have the bone within it, but as part of it, but it's not the bone is not called a shofar. The Gemara, we find Rosh HaShanah Chav Zayin Amud Beis, that if you covered it with gold, where you put your mouth on it, it's possible. There's some places lately that you see them covering the mouthpiece with silver, it's possible. You can't put your mouth on the silver and blow, because there should be nothing separating the shofar from the mouth. But if you put silver on the outside and it doesn't change the voice, then technically it's kosher. Certainly we're talking about when it's not where the mouth is found. It doesn't mean on the inside, because that would make it a different sound completely. In Sivcha Vav, he cites that the Rosh explains that outside, it's talking where it's put on the outside, and the voice is not changed because of that little bit of covering. But if it would be changed, it would be possible. It's just letting us know that it's not like placing a shofar within another shofar. And therefore, there's a difference between whether the voice was changed or not. That if he puts one shofar into another shofar and he blows, but the one he's blowing is the one that's in his mouth, then it's considered one shofar, even though there are 2 shofars in his hands. Within one, which he's blowing with his mouth, and the other one he's just holding, and the voice is continuing out. Now, in Sif Lamed he says, why is a apostle where he places his mouth? Because there's a separation between his mouth to the shofar. And therefore, if he would somehow put his fingers between the shofar and his mouth, or have ear between them, it's possible. And there are those who explain because it's not the voice of the shofar. The difference being that when he does have ear separating it, the voice is still emanating from the shofar. But we write that he should not have the shofar distant from his mouth and blow in it. It's possible. And the Ramban tells us those who make pictures on a shofar with all different types of color, it's not correct to do so because maybe it will cause the voice of the shofar to change. But in the shofar itself, you can cut some of the bone to make it look nice. That without color, it's always the voice of the shofar, not the voice of something else. Now we mentioned this in Sif Lamed Aleph that if you put a shofar within a shofar, if you hear the inner voice of the shofar, that's fine. If you hear the outer one, it's not correct, and you're not yoitzer. Meaning that the inner one is inside his mouth, and that's what he's blowing through, and it extends beyond the extent of the outer one, and therefore the voice that's coming out that you hear is only the voice of the inner one, then it's okay. And even if it's equal at the other end, the inner one is in his mouth, and at the other end they come out even, it's also okay because then you only hear the shofar. But if the outer one overlaps the inner one, then it will expand the voice, and that voice will be the voice of the outer shofar as well. As we said, you need to hear the voice of the shofar itself. Siv Lamed Beis, he points out that a shofar of Hashonoh, you do not transgress for it yontiv. You don't say that the assay of shofar is doicha the loises of yontiv, because we mentioned in Simon Tufsadekei that yontiv is an assay and a loises, a positive and a negative commandment. You have to honor yontiv and you have to not transgress it. Whereas the obligation, the positive command to blow a shofar, doesn't mean that you can make a shofar on yontiv. And even in Isser Rabbanan, the shofar would not be doicha because the Chachamim, when they made it something forbidden, they said it's by everything. Similar to, has all the qualities of a deraisa, and therefore they said on Rosh HaShanah that falls on Shabbos, they made an edict, and we do not blow on Shabbos because you're not transgressing the positive commandment by doing something, but rather by not doing anything, by refraining from doing. And therefore they said in many places, such as Lulav and other places, that one should not do it, and they gave it the power of Torah. Sif Lamed Gimel, the Aruch HaShulchan says, therefore, if the shofar was on top of a tree or on the other side of a river, and he has no other shofar, he cannot go up to the tree because that's a forbidden thing under Yontif. Neither can he take a boat to go across. And if there were stones on it, he can't take off the stones to get to the shofar, unless he set aside beforehand that these stones would be usable for something else. You can't go to chutz l'tchum to hear kol shofar, and you don't bring a shofar from a chutz l'tchum beyond the boundary for which the persons are permitted to go on Shabbos, and you can't create the shofar, whether by hand or with a vessel, because with a vessel it's deraisa, he's creating a vessel, and in his hand it's kla'ach hayad, which is forbidden d'rabbanan, and a knife would be deraisa. And if you do it with a scythe, which you usually don't use as a tool, it's rabbanan because it's kla'ach hayad. In Sif Lamed Daled, he mentions that this is only if Yisrael does it, but through a goy, You can do certain things which the Chacham do not permit a Jew to do. The Goy can do it because you have a mitzvah. But with Issa Deraisa, you can't tell a Goy what to do something for you. And even according to the Ramah, who says that they permitted a Goy to do it, even for Deraisa, but something that you can sit not complete, they didn't permit. And here by Shrefa, we've seen the Gabi Shabbos that the Chacham said, you can sit back and not do it, and therefore you can tell a goy to go up to the tree to bring it down, or to bring it from a chutz 2,000 amas, but not 12 mil. That 12 mil, according to the Rif and the Rambam, is the Raisa. And there, although one could rely here too that that's also only the Rabbonim. Now, it would seem from the fact that the poskim, those who codify the halacha, would seem to be saying that even on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, where it's Rabbonon, you can still tell a goy to do it. Since Yom Rishon it's mut on the second day, still, this is because it's a shvus, and it's a mitzvah, even if it's a mitzvah Rabbonon, that just like the Acham didn't nullify a deraisu with their things, so too, on the second day of Yom Tov, you can do it as well. Now, if the non-Jew, if the non-Jew did it by himself, he made a shofar, he came to give it to his Jewish friend, he can blow on it, even though he made it for the Jew. It's not like a non-Jew does an action for a Jew on Shabbos and Yom Tov that's forbidden for a Jew to use, because there's two reasons that you shouldn't benefit from him. Maybe he'll tell him to do it, he'll forget, and he'll tell the guy to do it. But by Shevet is only a mitzvah, and since it's only connected to mitzvah, we don't make xera. Maybe he'll tell it a guy to bring it or to make it. It's only something which you personally have benefit from. But something which you don't personally have benefit from, it does not apply. In Simla Medvovi says, that's when the Goy made the shofar from his own ram. There's no Issa Muktzah, because the Goy has no Muktzah. However, if he took it from a Jew's, then there's a problem of Noilel B'Shat B'Yontiv. But you can't blow on it, because Bein HaShmoshes was Muktzah. Once it's Muktzah Bein HaShmoshes, you can't blow on it the rest of Yom Tov. If the guy did it out of the Jew's shofar, let's assume he worked for the Jew, and there was a dead ram, or a ram that died, and he took the shofar off of it, and he made a new one. Sivla Mazayin, you can place a shofar in water, or in vinegar, or in wine, to make it easier to blow, that the sound should be better. It is not a concept of correctifying a vessel, but it only adds to the sound. It doesn't make the sound. And he adds that urine, even during the weekdays, it's forbidden to do it, because it's not, even though urine helps to make the shofar more subtle, still you're not allowed to do it because it's not a derech kovet. And he adds finally, you should know that it was brought by a goy from beyond the boundary. You should not move it outside at all. And that completes Siman Tuvkuf Pei Vov 586.